Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and tonight I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted, how you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Good, man. It's good to see your shining face tonight. Let us talk about gods, religion, spirituality, and Aether Skies.
Is not a world that has a rich, God-filled world. So what does religion look like with that kind of backdrop?
Right. So one of the primers that I gave out was like kind of the world. And like it starts out like your traditional fantasy world where it probably does have many pantheons and different gods that are revered and worshipped. But come age 2, the gods have left. So it doesn't leave a whole lot of room. But that being said, in the third age, which we are playing in now, there are religions and there is a lot of mysticism and the occult. Right. And in some ways, I feel like occult is a pretty good stand-in for spirituality and religion as well. Right. And there's also cults. Right. So that's about revering and worship as well. In addition to like just straight up, there are religions. It's just not necessarily your traditional. They're actually closer to maybe real world religions is a holy city. Right. So they're ruled by a theocracy. So clearly there is religion there, but also like that is where the Knights of the Anti-Aether kind of come from. And in our first campaign, Ty's character played one of those. And they're religious zealots who want to purge Aether and reclaim the surface in the name of purity, right? And they want to do away with it. Unfortunately, right now, like all the cities and where most of the people live are sustained by it, right? So for them, it is a necessary evil. But at the same time, we have other things going on where maybe there isn't gods, but there are religions. And there are definitely cults. There are cults to the things that have been locked behind the seal. And I'm sure there are other ones that are going to pop up as well, right? So I feel like there's a lot of room for us to explore it in Aether Skies. We just haven't really done it yet.
So with an aspect of it's a game dealing with eldritch horror, like beyond cults, I imagine like there could just straight up be worship of these eldritch beings that are out there. There could be those who are praying to the unheard. They could be praying to the gods that have left. And maybe there's a fraction of that power that's out there that heeds the call even without the aspect. And I could even go so far as to say, given it's Aether Skies and we've got floating cities and flying airships, I imagine the concept of air, from an elementalist standpoint, is probably respected, if not straight up revered, because it is like literally it's all around you. It's right in the freaking name. And it's absolutely merciless. Should you fall off, it's like you're done. Like there is no, oh, let me fly or feather fall or whatnot. Like you're gonna splat way down below.
That is definitely a side effect of living miles in the sky. And also, like, because there were gods at one point, that means during play, these old gods that are gone could also be rediscovered. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll answer your prayers or provide power per se or grant miracles, much in the real world where it's an act of faith, right? But that being said, it doesn't mean that faith might not have its own way of channeling the aether. And some folks, through a more religious and spiritual kind of process, begin mastering the powers of aether. Even if they don't themselves understand that's what they're doing, perhaps it is a different way of harnessing aether that is different than how ethermancers and etherficers kind of do it. Matter of fact, in some ways, it is kind of like how an ether might do it, in the sense that you're channeling through a conduit. In this case, it could be a religious conduit or a spiritual conduit. And also maybe something that's answering your prayers isn't the thing you intended. Because we do have the Eldritch horrors, and that's definitely a part of things where through the bleeds and the seeping through the seals, these forces could interact with the world and begin kind of developing priests and clerics that kind of go out and prophesize for them. And maybe there's some deception there. Maybe they present themselves in a way that is not what the cleric or the priest or the faithful think. Right? Because in actuality, it's an eldritch horror that's granting them their power and kind of manipulating and using them. But at the same time, too, like I think instead of having gods, we're going to develop specific religions Like we already have one religion in Theopolis, and I think they do have ways, or I don't think I know they have ways that affecting the world that kind of seems like magic. Matter of fact, a lot of their abilities stem from their ability to kind of like throw off or disrupt the natural aether of the world, which they've deemed it as their enemy. And in some ways they're not wrong, because aether, the magic in this world, is kind of hostile. Well, wielding magic in this world is more like trying to break a stallion than your traditional fantasy worlds where you're just going to learn from a book and the magic does what you want it to do. In Aether Skies, you can kind of make it do what you want it to, but it doesn't want to. It almost has a will of its own. And that being said, that could also be a thing that gets worshipped too. I can only imagine, like, this is what sustains the cities. This is what's risen them from the surface world where all these horrors are. It is their salvation, even though it may not be the most kind or gentle of forces. But at the end of the day, without it, they would have been destroyed because of whatever happened on the surface, as far as they know, or that's what they're taught. So I imagine there will be religions around that as well.
So, like, when you look at like the D&D gods, do any of the stories you hear really make you feel like, oh, it's all kind and gentle? Like, it's like, okay, well, I'll bestow power upon you, but it's still a mortal enacting it. The gods are not stepping in and fixing the problems or causing whatever. It's just creating a conduit. So like, it's still moral judgment. So I don't feel like this situation of like, it's not all puppies and fairies is any different than any other fantasy religion out there.
Well, and also, like, you can look to the real world too, right? Real world religions that really aren't based on gods per se or worshiping of a god, right? You can definitely have that. But because it's a fantasy world, you can have those religions still empower the people that believe in it strongly. I mean, in some ways, I almost see the priests and clerics in Aether Skies similar to paladins, right? Where paladins in 5e, they don't necessarily have to draw their divine power from a god, right? It's from their oaths itself. And there's no reason why we can't treat all divine characters that way in Aether Skies. And that's actually kind of the way I'm leaning, with the exception of people that are more occult. And again, like, we're going to explore that. Now, we have an upcoming Aether Skies campaign in the works, and it's going to be after Ted's done running the current Zoo Mafia game. I haven't seen, everyone's characters yet, but if there's any religious characters, any paladins or clerics in the group, or even druids, which druids are actually a little bit easier because they just worship the forces of nature to an extent, and also like kind of like the air and elementalism you were talking about, Ted. It's right into that. So that's really easy. But hopefully at least one of the characters will have a divine bent to them so that we can explore that a little bit more, because as a GM, I tend to not do a lot of work on stuff that isn't happening in the game, or maybe the game that we run will involve more religious figures in it. And so we can then explore that some more.
I have a lot of, angles of faith just because I'm naturally drawn to clerics. No, just because I'm not playing a cleric in this game or that game doesn't mean my character doesn't have religious aspects. They don't always. Now, we played Aether Skies a while ago. Now, as you mentioned, Ty had a very religious character, and mine wasn't. And I'm not looking to make a religious character, but if something were to come up in the game, maybe this means something. Maybe it's time to find religion. And that's great.
So some of my favorite interactions in our first Aether Skies game was between Ty's character and your character and Dr. Lucy's character. You played Bunny, the artifact, and then Robin played Dr. Lucy, an Aetherficer. Or not Aetherficer, Aethermancer. And
I was an Aetherficer. Robin was an Aethermancer.
Right. So those two were the most diametrically opposed to Ty's character's belief system, because he was this knight of the anti-aether, this religious zealot. They don't like magic. They don't like ether. And in addition to that, Theopolis, the city itself, doesn't really care for non-humans. They have to kind of prove their worth. So seeing the relationship build between those three characters, to me, was a lot of fun. And Ty is also a really good role player. So like, instead of just starting off as, oh, I'm just going to play this really bigoted character, like his character grew as the campaign progressed, and his world views kind of widened. He never like fully agreed with the use of magic or ether, but by the end, he could see the value of the individuals that were wielding it. You see them for more than just their characteristics of, this is an elf, this is a kobold, and they wield magic. Matter of fact, some of the best interactions, I would say, Ted, was between you and Ty, because your character, you played him as being very kind of downtrodden, beaten down.
Servile.
Yeah, very servile. And also he didn't have a lot of self-confidence. But there was definitely a point where Ty's character actually started to recognize and value what he brought to the crew, his talents, and was actually we started building him up. So to see that 180 kind of turnaround through gameplay, through this lens of the super religious character, to me, it was a lot of fun. And it was one of the highlights of that campaign.
I love arcs like that. Ty is a lot of fun to role play with, and I love the hell out of those interactions. And it's easy for me to play those kind of like downtrodden characters, just because it's easy to just be like, all right, well, let's shove the attention away from me. Let's lift other people up and downplay whatever it is that I do. Yeah, and I don't want to do those kind of things all the time because they get really depressing, but it's very fun to every so often get into those kind of things. Now, I've got a nod to Bunny with the character that I'm playing, but he is not going to be the same kind of mindset, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see where the campaign goes and to see what happens as hopefully maybe we get to explore more of the religions and spirituality in that campaign setting. And hey, the gods vanished doesn't necessarily mean they can't come back. That could be a future arc. Who knows? But we'll leave it there for Aether Skies when it comes to gods, religions, and spirituality. But with that, until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.